When designers or planners talk about density or population, we equify density means success or it means growth. If you see the problems that we have now all around the world, I'd always take it back to Bombay because the issues in design are a bit different there. Density is the biggest problem, to be honest. We are very populated and we have everything. We have transit, we have everything, but you just cannot, in American context, you can't just say we need density. There needs to be more things that needs to be taken care about. That is zoning and, how you can allow jurisdictions to plan that kind of zoning, allow that kind of a density. You can't just build something 10-story in a suburb. You need to factorize where you're building what. It's not one size fits all. Urban planning and design needs to have a context. You can't just have one solution to all the problems.
As you know, I have a very clear mission with building green. And I know so many brilliant architects, interior designers, and contractors who do too. But they're still stuck working on projects that drain them, with clients who don't value what they bring. That's why we founded Market Your Architecture a year ago. It's a marketing agency that helps mission-driven designers attract better clients, charge what they are worth, and finally build the kind of portfolio that reflects who they really are. If that sounds like the shift you need, there's a link in the description to marketyourarchitecture.com. And before we jump into the podcast, please rate and subscribe. It really helps me reach more people like you. In a world increasingly facing the challenges of climate change, with the Building Green podcast, we will dive deep into the intersection of architecture, design, urbanism, and environmental responsibility. I'm Ladina Schipf, your host. I've been an architect and building site manager for the past 10 years. During my studies at ETH in Switzerland, as well as in my working environment, I've had many touchpoints with sustainability, like many of you, I guess. I've also learned to question what I've been told, which is why I decided to go deeper into the topic and uncover what sustainability actually means. My mission is to highlight the transformative power of sustainable architecture, not just as a practice, but as a catalyst for broader societal change. Subscribe for more of our content and enjoy the show. Social isolation and loneliness increase the risk of heart disease by 29% and stroke by 32%. That's comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So when cities lack shared spaces for connection, it literally hurts our health. Karina and Aishwarya of Mali grew up in completely different cities, Curitiba, Brazil, and Mumbai, India. But both were shaped by the same thing: how cities either serve people or don't. Today they live in the US and bring a global lens to the question, what makes a city truly livable? Together they host Urban on the Go, a podcast that explores what it's like to move through cities as women, immigrants, and designers, questioning norms and noticing details others often miss. In this episode, we talk about why thoughtful urban design goes far beyond density. You will hear how city planning can either isolate people or bring them together, what third places actually do for our mental health, and why something as simple as walking home at night tells you everything you need to know about a place. So I'm really excited to have you here today, Karina and Aishwarya. Let's start at the very beginning. What's the earliest piece of context I need to know about each of you to understand who you are today?
If you look at the background of my video, there's a Brazilian flag, so I was born in Brazil. And if I think about architecture, planning, urbanism, I think that the city where I was born plays a big role in the profession that I decided to pursue. I was born in Curitiba, which is in the south of Brazil. And it's a city that is really well known for its urbanism because the mayor in the 70s, he really created like a really big plan to advance the city in terms of urban design, infrastructure. And also he was the one that created the bus rapid transit system.
What is it, that system?
The bus rapid transit, called BRT. So basically it's going to be a bus system that has fewer stops, so you can move across the city in a much faster speed. It's kind of like a really cheap version of a train, because you don't want to go underground, so you kind of keep it everything above ground and using the infrastructure that you already have. But it kind of works in a similar way.
Very cool. And how about
Yeah.
you?
I'm born in Mumbai in India, and I've been there for almost 25 years. And like Karina, even for me, it's the same. Like my city has played a big role in choosing my profession. So I started out as an architect in India, and I practiced there for like 3 years. But then, of course, as you know, it is one of the most populated city in the world, and I can like see how urban design affects how people live in the city, like having clean air or even having access to transit and how people commute every day. So that has really played a huge role in understanding how important urban infrastructure is for people. And during COVID is when, when we were all distancing ourselves from each other, that time I understood how cities play a huge role in day-to-day life. So that's when I decided to like pursue urban design more wholeheartedly and, do my master's here in US. And that's how my journey started as an urban designer.
And so you both come from places that have very different urban realities, if we can say so. Mumbai and Curitiba. What was your first culture shock when you started studying and working in urban design in the US?
There were many cultural shocks. And I was prepared for that, to be honest. It's a different country, different history, different people. First thing is that in Mumbai, we do have a lot of cars and congestion. But here, it was like extremely car dependent. I think that was like one of the biggest cultural shocks because what I saw US in the movies, I've never visited this country before, so I couldn't, see how it is, to be honest. And I came to Atlanta. So Atlanta is again known for its sprawl urbanism. It was not that I went to New York first time. So I've only seen New York, I've only seen Chicago, in the movies or something. So seeing that everyone needs to have a car, at least one car, that means anyone can have more than one. So that was, I think, the biggest cultural shock for me.
How is mobility in Mumbai?
I mean, I realized I walked very fast when I arrived here because in Mumbai, especially because everyone's um, trying to get somewhere in that chaos. You have to like be fast, be quick. Um, Mobility in India, like you said, it's very accessible for for everyone from even the homeless, or everyone can take the train. So you have people who are from working class, who don't do anything, even they can take the train or anything. Buses are connected. You have vehicles. Like I myself did not have like a personal car for most of my life. It was only when I graduated architecture is when I actually started driving. So I never needed a car, to be honest. And then you have, we have taxis also, but then you have something called an auto rickshaw, which is something like a three-wheeler car. It's like a tuk-tuk if people are familiar with that concept. So we have that. Even those are shared sometimes, with different people. So mobility, like there's a lot of options for mobility.
That's so interesting. How about you, Karina? What was your biggest shock from an urbanistic perspective, when you got here?
I have a little bit of a different experience than Aishwarya's because I actually visited the US twice before I moved here. And my first trip was a little bit of like both sides of like maybe the best and the worst. I'm not going to say the worst, but um, it was about 8 years ago, I think now, 7 or 8 years ago. And on the first trip, I visited Orlando and New York City, which are very, very different in terms of everything urbanism, density, uses, mobility, everything. Um, so I think that I got a little bit of like an experience of how a lot of the cities end up working in that very like car dependent way my first time in Orlando, because it was a really like weird experience for me, because everything in the city was really nice. You know, things around mountain and like landscaping and everything. The roads are just like really smooth and nice. But it was just a lot of like sprawl, and I don't know, like the way that the city is laid out really didn't make any sense for me in a way, even though I was not super deep into urbanism yet. And then I got to go to New York a couple of days later, and it was really mind blowing for me just to see like the size of the city, how you can walk everywhere, and it's like actually a nice experience, even though it's cold and it's super windy. But it was a really nice experience because you have nice architecture that activates the street, and you have public spaces, and you just have a bunch of interesting things happening at the street level. Um, so I got those like very contrasting experiences the first time that I was here. So when I came to Atlanta, I did a lot of research about the city. I felt like I was pretty well prepared. Um, then, of course, I still saw a lot of like this car dependency thing that we have, especially in here. But I feel like I was a little bit more used to it in a way. But then if I think back to really when I started, a little bit in school, but especially after I graduated, I started working and like seeing how everything actually works in the real life. How much we have to really be thinking about like, you got to have a bunch of parking. Most of the cities do have zoning requirements for a lot of parking, and even like working with developers that a lot of the times the cheapest way to do something is gonna be to have like a surface parking lot, which is definitely not, most of the time is not really adding anything to the city experience. So part of that, and also something that is a little bit more related to architecture, but still I think it's very different, is that everything is very standardized in here. Like there are specific dimensions for everything, like modules when you're thinking of like the layout of spaces and different building sizes. That's not something that I really like had a lot of background in Brazil, because I think that it's different in the sense that a lot of the projects are kind of, you kind of start not from zero, but like you don't really start from specific modules. I think in Brazil it's like a lot more unique in a way, which is less efficient for sure, but it's just a different approach.
Do you mean like from an urbanistic perspective, or are we already talking about the specific buildings? Like, I guess you also have zoning laws and
oh yeah
all the regulations you
Yeah.
have to, and then like developers will try to make the most out of it and maximize the space, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm speaking a little bit more on like really the architecture side, but like thinking of the internal spaces of a building. It just because like in here, when Aishwarya and I went to school together for our master in urban design, it was a really big thing that like we needed to learn that basically a residential like multifamily building is basically going to be this wide, and like the width the length can vary, but it's going to be this wide, and like a specific commercial building is going to be this size, and like the parking deck, everything has kind of like specific dimension. And then when you go really look into like a floor plan for architecture, also have like room sizes that you're basically going to apply everywhere. So that kind of create like a more modular system, not thinking really on like the zoning side.
I was actually surprised when I was here last year. So in Switzerland, it's similar to Brazil. Every building is specific and unique. Maybe you have obviously some buildings that are more individual, more designed, let's say, and some that are more standard, but every building is different. But when we got here, we were talking with a couple and they were so excited. They just had bought a house and they told me how it worked. So they had like an empty plot, huge empty plot, and they did like the urban design there. So just homes. and you could pick a plot and pick one of the houses from like between 10 houses. The only requirement was that you couldn't pick a house that was already in your street. And that's it. And they were so excited about their house. And me as an architect, like, it hurt me so much to hear that story, because I know how we design in Europe. Every building is unique, or maybe there are some buildings that speak kind of the same language because they're built together, but then it's, as a conglomerate, a unique building, let's say. Let's go back to the city level. Your podcast, Urb on the Go, explores urbanism from the perspective of kind of outsiders looking in. If you had to summarize the biggest misconception Americans have about their own cities, what would it be?
What I think is, of course, like there's no misconception. I mean, everyone lives the way they want to live. There's no right and wrong. But I feel when designers or planners talk about density or population, we equify density means success or it means growth. But I feel that's kind of like, a tricky thing to say, and kind of a myth also, because of course density is good for mixed use, but there is a way how that density is monitored. You just like, because I say this because right now we are talking a lot in US, how we can densify neighborhoods, how we can create mixed use to add that density. I get it, but then if you see, that's not the only thing. How it is connected, what is the quality of life within that density, I think that needs to be measured. If you see the problems that we have now all around the world, especially if you consider a city like, I'd always take it back to Bombay, because the issues in design are very different there. Density is the biggest problem, to be honest. We are very populated, and we have everything. We have transit, we have everything, but you just cannot, in American context, you can't just say we need density. There needs to be more things that needs to be taken care about. That is zoning, and how you can allow jurisdictions to plan that kind of zoning, allow that kind of a density. You can't just build something 10-story in a suburb. You need to factorize where you're building what. So I think this is the kind of thing that we always have to go back and think about, that it's not one size fits all. Urban planning and design needs to have a context. You can't just have one solution to all the problems.
Are you talking about the 15-minute city now?
You could say that in a way. I'm not particularly talking about 15-minute city. I think the term started with the 15-minute cities term started with somewhere in like early 2000, when we were talking about having housing and neighborhoods having access to like transit. And that's how that term, trickled down to having 15-minute city. You can have 15-minute city by including like different kind of uses together. But I think that's a concept different altogether. Nowadays, I think what we are trying to do is, especially I think this is not at all American context, but as planners in America, we kind of just justify that we need to increase density everywhere, and then that's going to solve the problem. But we do not think about zoning that goes behind that, like what is around it, and you need to preserve some kind of zoning, like especially for example, I was just talking to a friend about this. Now, the city of Portland here, what it has done is it understands the value of creating density, but it also understands the value of preserving your environment, preserving the natural habitat. So it came up with something called urban growth boundary. And what it does is it prevents sprawl in such a way that, okay, you can still increase density, but you don't need to spread out from the urban growth boundary. So I think we need to understand where we can densify, because I think Atlanta is kind of a city like Atlanta, which has like a sprawl-like situation. What's happening is that we are trying to densify each of these nodes, but we are not trying to think of a bigger, larger picture. So that is something that is missing, I think, in some of the planning that we do.
That's very interesting. Now, if we change the perspective, and you, Karina, you talked before about the pedestrian experiences and third places. If you could design a space or a public space from scratch, you just mentioned they're often poorly designed or missing. What are three non-negotiables that you think must be included in a public space?
Probably would be thinking of the scale that you're working with. Um, of course, every place is unique in a way, and the context plays a lot of roles into it. But if you're really designing something for human beings, which is most usually the case, you need to be thinking about how the person is going to interact with the space and like how the person is going to feel in that space and the scale of everything, both really like the size of the space that you're creating, any architectural elements around it, how wide the street is, and like how tall the things are. And even if you're thinking about furniture or like specific elements in that place that you're designing, thinking of the scale and how you're going to interact with those, I think it's absolutely important. Activation or uses in a way. I think I'd say activation because it's really a term that gets used a lot in the US and I don't always love it. Because a lot of times it means like, oh, we have a space and there's nothing around it, so we need to activate it. And ideally, you're going to be creating something in an area that already has other uses that are really going to make people go there, spend time in a space that you're creating, but really like having a reason for people to be there. And that can be done through activation. It can be done through different uses. Like you might have a little coffee shop in this new plaza that you're designing that is really going to make people want to go there, but also like ways that people can spend time without having to pay, which is very important. And some cities don't really have that. So like a playground might be super important in a neighborhood that has a lot of families, or a dog park that is becoming super famous these days.
Talking about activation triggered another thought in me, and that's safety. Let's talk about missed activation, how that influences the safety of a city.
Yeah, I mean, I think this, I never thought about that cities can make you feel safe. When I was in India, it was never a concept, that it just happened. We never thought that you need someone, something to be activated for it to be safe. It was never a concept. But when I arrived here, especially when I read Jane Jacobs' book, where she mentions about a term called eyes on the street, is something that's, it kind of clicked to me that it's very important to at least have a notion that, someone's keeping an eye on you, not literally watching you, but at least it's the idea of, when you're walking on the street, you want to be in a place where someone can still see you, so that you kind of feel protected or safe. Now that may or may not be the reason. I mean, that may or may not happen. Things still happen, crimes still take a place, but then what it does is it kind of motivates people to be out there and hang out more, walk more, take the public transit more, because they kind of feel safe, and this kind of enables safety even more. So it's kind of like a circle. And speaking about safety, Karina, you want to take ahead from this?
Sure. I think this is a little bit more of a more complex question for sure, because when we think of in terms of safety, it's not only like one thing that is playing a role into it. Depending on really like the place we're talking about, there's going to be a lot more crime, even if the city is well designed, like it goes a lot deeper than that. But if we think about how the urban design can really impact, I think that Aishwarya, I knew you'd mention Jane Jacobs. Absolutely. Just the idea of eyes on the street definitely plays a big role, because again, it varies depending on the place you're talking to, and there are a lot of factors that play a role into it. But there's a really big difference between a place that has different uses. So there are going to be people walking or like in that space throughout different times of the day. So if you have like residences, offices, shops, restaurants along the same area, you're going to have different users and different users throughout the day at different times. So that's like a big thing that's going to play a role in safety, because there's always going to be people around. And the concept of eyes on the street is really like, if there are people watching the street or the public space, you won't necessarily be safer, but at least you should be feeling safer. And also, if you think of like a dead end street or like a dark alley that you don't know where it's going, it's usually not the place where you're going to feel safer, because like you don't know what's back there, or like there's nothing back there. So like there might be something like on your way back, So also, I think it's both like the uses part or the activation part, but also I think a lot about connectivity, especially like street connectivity. If the city is well connected and you have a lot of different routes, I also, at least in my personal experience, I think it's a lot easier for you to feel safer in a way that like you can take a different route if you feel unsafe where you currently are. You can just like turn around and go to another street.
It's so interesting. I was just yesterday evening walking around alone, and as a woman, you have constantly, when you're walking alone at night, you're constantly looking around like, do I see houses with lights on? Like, is somebody like the concept of eyes on the street, right? And if something would happen right now, do I have a way out?
You need someone to at least hear you if you kind of scream for help. Or, I mean, as women, we are more, not saying crimes don't like happen to men also, it happens, but as women, you are kind of already more aware of the surrounding, and need to consider like I remember in Atlanta especially, like how it was not a cultural shock, but how different it was, because some of our classes were like ending at 9 o'clock or something. Okay, and in US, a lot of people I tend like have dinner very early and go to bed very early. That's what I've observed, at least in the residential area where I was living. And it, like Karina said, it was very good to have connected streets, because at least the Midtown Atlanta, it had some sort of a grid happening there. I'm not sure, but it was still well connected to an extent. And if we see someone, whom you think is not safe at the moment, you could just like take a detour, or get into a shop. Like, I think that's very important, having stores open like Walgreens or CVS. If you think something's happening, something wonky is happening outside, you just get into the store and just wait there or tell someone. So that's very important, to have this kind of different uses along the street. Unfortunately, we have to, we have to think that way, but cities do kind of create this safety spaces at some point where you can allow it to happen.
I love that you bring that up, because we had classes at the same time and we would walk home, usually in a group of at least like 5 people. And Aishwarya and I used to live kind of close by, like 3 blocks away, probably. So like we would walk together for a part of our way back home. And then like I would go to my apartment, Aishwarya would go to her apartment. But like I remember very clearly how much safer it felt, like up to that point that like I went out to my apartment, and when you went to your place, because like you were just a little bit farther out, like 2 blocks 2 blocks farther out, But there's like such a stark difference in the amount of people in the street, and like the blocks start to get a little bit longer, and then it starts to be like more of a deserted place. So I just remember very clearly like how even when you're like very close to another area and you still have like this different sensation of like feeling of safety, just because of a couple of smaller things that sometimes we don't think about, like uses and the street sizes and
The block sizes, you mentioned something. The block size is, I mean, it's good to have blocks which are not too long. So, like you said, they break into streets basically. So you kind of have a chance to meet someone at the intersection, or you can like change routes or something. So that is, I remember discussing about this sometime, but that's a great point. I think a lot of successful planning is like having a good block size.
Just a quick reality check. If you're constantly over-delivering, working around the clock, and still chasing the right kind of projects, you're not alone. I keep meeting architects, interior designers, and contractors in that exact cycle, which is actually why we started Market Your Architecture. We help you reposition your work and get in front of more of the right people, so you can finally choose who you want to work with. If that sounds interesting to you and you want to know more about us, you'll find the link to marketyourarchitecture.com in the description. What's funny when we're talking about good planning, a city that comes to mind also talking about mixed uses to make you feel safe and street sizes and everything is Brasilia. I was there and it was summer. It was super hot and I was traveling alone, but I met an architect at this first museum that I went to, and he was a Brazilian architect also traveling alone. So we decided to go down the whole museum road. It's like a huge park. There's no one. There's nothing. It was so hot. There wasn't even a shop to buy water. There wasn't even a tree for shadow. You were like alone there in that huge space. And then we would go into like one of those super blocks, and that would be fun. There is more mixed use than what they had planned initially. What do you think about the city? Did it go wrong, or is it how it should be?
Well, unfortunately, I have never been to Brasilia, so I cannot give you the best context, I guess. I've studied about it and I've seen it from a plane. Well, I think that Brasilia definitely, like, it was super innovative at the time that it was designed, super innovative at the time that it was built. And it has a lot of interesting aspects to it, but also like a lot of things that they were just super modernism, city building, that like a lot of things that come with it are just not really good for like the experience that we like to have in the city.
Oh, I think from an architecture perspective, it's an amazing city. It's just from the pedestrian perspective. And suddenly you were like in the middle of nowhere, walking between the museums, and suddenly you would walk around the corner and you were like underneath like a bus station with a lot of weird people there. So I constantly felt a bit unsafe. Now let's talk about sustainability. And I want to start with the urban history of cities like New York, San Francisco, Chicago. What are the biggest lessons that you think those cities can teach us about sustainable development?
I think that if we think especially of this more like historical cities in the US that started being built at least a couple of centuries ago, really the way that they started to develop were very different than what we see right now. Like if we compare some of the newer cities, especially if you think in the South, like the pattern of development is very different. I have not been to Chicago. I'm actually going to be there in a couple of weeks. But I could talk a lot about New York and San Francisco at least. But I think that all of the three cities have kind of a similar pattern where you have a lot of density and a lot of density, not a lot of sprawl. And when you start to create that pattern of density and you have a lot of people living and working and shopping and having fun and, spending time outdoors, all kind of in the same area, you really create this very active, very lively city, and which makes it also a lot easier for having infrastructure, having mobility systems. And if you think about really that like sustainability side, not even going to like super deep green, talking about materials or other systems or anything, but like if you have density, like things are more concentrated and you can have the infrastructure be more effective, that's a huge win.
Definitely. Aishwarya, do you have something to add?
What Karina said is totally, I agree totally upon that. And what these cities, like if I go back and see, and even if, like she said, they were designed like, 100 years back, maybe, who knows. But what was good was because maybe they did not think, because sustainability was never a word, I think, even 20 years back. It's been a very recent concept. But what they did was definitely think something called comprehensive planning or think for the long term. So they had a framework ready. I think in planning, what is important is to see the long term effects of what you do now. And I think most of these cities or planners back then kind of knew that what they are doing now, the laying of streets, or even the kind of zoning they had back then, there was an idea, a purpose behind it, and to see what happens after 10 years. What happens now, I wouldn't say it happens that often, but there's like, what disrupts sustainability is piecemeal planning, which is done, oh, we need this now, so I'm going to make this now. But you don't think about, what is the carbon footprint going to be? Second, how is it going to affect the built environment around? Third, what's going to happen with that place in the next 10 years? Like if I build something on, let's say, if it's along a small creek or something, and I just build something over there without planning that it's going to flood in the next 10 years. I mean, it's going to flood in the next 10 years, but I'm not thinking about 10 years. I'm just thinking about now because I want to develop this housing or something around it. So I think what's important, especially in planning, is to have a framework that will at least, you can kind of project what's going to happen in the next 5 or at least 10 years, have an idea that these are the things that could happen, will happen, and are intended to happen. So I think that will help to incorporate sustainability in planning.
And if we talk about zoning rules, like jumping perspectives again, something else that I want to talk about in from an urbanistic perspective is the concept of loneliness, because it's considered as dangerous to health as smoking. How do you think our zoning rules can influence loneliness in a city?
I think it ends up coming back to the idea of uses a lot and density all of the same way, but also mobility. I think that every time we talk about something in the city, we're going to come back to kind of the same ideas, because they're kind of like the foundations
and
of what
public
make
spaces.
a good city. And public spaces, yes. Yeah, I kind of incorporated that into uses, but yes, public spaces. If I at least like look back at the experience that I have in here and kind of try to apply that in more of a like in a broad sense, I think that some of the things that really are going to impact like how lonely or how connected you feel in the city is how close you live to other people, and like if you have spaces to hang out, kind of the third places that you mentioned before. So like, do you have a safe place that you can both go to and meet and have fun, like be outside an open space, for example, but it could also be like a shop, a restaurant, or just a really nice street that you like to walk along. So does that kind of includes the idea of density and includes the idea of uses and open spaces. But also the question of the topic of mobility, I think it's so important. Because if I think, at least me in Atlanta, I've been living here for 3.5 years. I don't have a car. It's challenging a lot of times, but I decided that I don't want to have a car in here. So there are a lot of situations that I cannot get to a friend's house because they live in an area that I cannot get the bus to go to, or like the train, or I cannot walk. Or if I actually try to get the bus, it's going to take me 2 hours. And if you drive, it's like 35 minutes, you know? So that idea of like, where can you actually go with the means that you have without necessarily having to have a car? Even if, and I'm not talking about like friends that live super far. It's just, it can be in the same city, but just like because of the way that Sprout and transportation and everything works, like it can get really hard for me to reach those places. And that affects a lot of people in like other circumstances.
Yeah. Loneliness, I mean, in cities definitely is a different thing, but a lot of loneliness also comes in, people who do not live in the city. And usually this happens if you're very old and, even if you have a car or even if you have access to mobility, it's just because you kind of live on your own as an older person. I think that is also one of the reasons I read that, a lot of elder people, they kind of don't have anyone to come and visit them for whatever reason. And I think the idea of third place kind of plays a big role in this, because you don't have to be in that area for any reason. It's a place where you can be safe. You don't have to be rich or poor or a boy, girl, or whoever. You can be whoever you want. And to kind of create that idea of safe space together, combined, where it's between your work, it's between your home. I think to create these third spaces is very tricky, especially if you're living in suburbs. And that's something even I'm trying to figure out as I'm working where I am right now, because a lot of our projects are in suburbs, and we are trying to see how we can get this third place integrated within, a very car dependent fabric where people may not hang outdoors as much as they do in the city environment.
And what are some of the strategies that you're implementing?
Mobility is good, but of course we cannot lay a new train route or a bus route. That's a huge, expensive, long-term process. But let's say it's very important to locate a potential site. I think that's very important. It needs to be a site where people tend to usually come to. That can be, an underutilized parking lot, an underutilized strip mall which has a parking lot where people tend to come to. They are attached to arterial streets. They usually have bus stops. So it's very important to understand where the site is. Like, I cannot make a third place in some random site where I don't know where people are coming. So it's very important to recognize where I'm going to start that. So that's what we do. We try to recognize where it is. If it's like a dying mall, I know what are the demographic around. I know who are the people. I know if there are more students or there are more older people, or if there are more, more diverse people. So that's the kind of thing we try to understand before we design anything. And then we come up with solution that what and how this third place is going to be. So it's just understanding whom you're serving and where you're going to make. So that's our first step. And I think that's a very crucial step, which takes like a lot of time. Sometimes not much, but usually it should take a lot of time for the research.
For those of our listeners who don't know what third places are, can you define what those are?
A third place, it's kind of in between the place that you live and the place that you work. So it would be a place that you go for other reasons. And that could be for fun. It could be to get a haircut, or even like get your groceries, or like go to a shop where maybe the person that like works at the shop. So it's really like a place that is a little bit of your um daily routine, in a way of like home and work, home and work. So it could be a couple of examples. Aishwarya, please give more examples as you can think of them. But it could be a park or a plaza, like some sort of open space. It could be a neighborhood coffee shop. It could be a bookstore. If you're like a farmer's market or something like that. As I mentioned before, it could be like a barber shop or the place that you go to get your nails done.
And it need not be, like she said, it not be an indoor space. It can just, um, what I imagine when I think of third place is basically it's a shed. If you're going to a nail salon, or let's say people, the idea of third place is to, enable people to have a chance to meet someone whom they can click with. It can be a friend or whatever, professional, personal, anything. So you definitely need a lot of different uses around this idea of third place. It's not like a physical, it could be a physical space, but it's kind of like a abstract imaginary place, where you meet someone accidentally, or you don't meet someone but you're observing someone. Like, it's sometimes so much fun to like just sit and see small kids play, or see dogs running here, like pets running here and there. So it's about that. And then slowly, it what is important is that it becomes a part of your routine. So you kind of familiar with the people who come there, and you kind of make that place your daily thing. You form connections. So that's the idea of having this third place. And I also read about this one concept, is that um, after work life. Now, that is something, a concept which people are trying to weave into third place. It's like nobody, like, people have this, like, you work 9 to 5, but what you are after that, nobody needs to know, nobody cares. And I think you're free to express that side of yours in a very respectful manner. But third place is where you can go without judgment. You can be whoever you are without judgment, and kind of find your people. So these are some different trends that I'm like reading about right now, and it's interesting to see how we can plan these places in the future.
Have you read anything about, have you found any studies about the comparison between the level of connection in third places in a small town where you have probably less third places? You only have one hairdresser, one bakery, one supermarket, but you're still judged because everybody knows everybody. Versus, right? Versus the level of connection in third places in cities, where I feel like every time I go to the hairdresser, I go to a different hairdresser because just whatever's convenient in that moment.
I have not read or seen any specific study about that, but what would come to my mind is the idea that like in a smaller town, you would have more of established community. And for example, like, oh, if you only have one barbershop of one hair salon, and like everyone is going to go to that place, so you're going to kind of establish some sort of community, or like you're going to keep seeing people over and over again. And then you create this, not necessarily a sense of community, but like, where people are. Like, if you don't see someone showing up for a couple of weeks, like you're going to get worried because like, are they sick? Like, did something happen? And that might be different in a big city just because you have a lot more people like coming and going. But I also think it could be replicated in a bigger city if you have a really strong neighborhood and you have a lot of third places. Like, that same thing can still happen in the bigger city. Like, I don't think that necessarily a smaller town would be better in that sense.
Yeah, you can have like a daily coffee shop where you go to in the morning. So someone who knows someone, the barista or someone, they know that, oh, you're coming here every day, but let's say you don't go there for like a week. And I'm not saying that they would go searching for you, but they will definitely, if like they'll definitely know that, some things like, where's this person, and maybe something might come out of it. So yeah, you can develop such relationships in, I think, bigger city as well.
How are third places or the level of connection in Mumbai and Curitiba?
I would think that for Curitiba, it would be a little bit shared between public spaces and private spaces. So, like, actually, one thing that a lot of people like to do on the weekend is go to the shopping mall. You know, even if you're not gonna buy anything, but just like walk around and grab an ice cream or have lunch at the food court, like that's a real thing. A lot of people do that. And then you also have like a movie theater inside a shopping mall a lot of times, or like some kind of other entertainment space. Let's say a lot of bars and restaurants, and they're like specific streets or like areas of a neighborhood that there are going to be like a lot of bars lining up a street, for example. So like you can kind of go to that street and like choose the place you'd want to go to. But also, if I think of Curitiba, there are a lot of really nice parks and public spaces throughout the city that both the tourists and really the residents would go to on a weekend. Like, it could be the botanical garden, or it could be, well, I don't know how to really pronounce the names in English, but like some of the public parks in the city. Like, that's really a place that anyone could go on a daily basis and like spend time and maybe run into someone.
It's funny that you mentioned the shoppings. I forgot about that. While I was living in Sao Paulo, I'm not a shopping mall person, but I would do that too. And I think because of one main reason, there is not like in Europe, we have like the small city centers, and you often just go to the city center because you want to walk around, people watch. You don't have to do anything there or buy anything, but you just go, yeah, be outdoors. And there's nothing like that in Brazil. There are no kind of outdoor spaces besides of the parks that you can just walk around and feel safe. So back to that safety thing. And now my question from a sustainability perspective is now, what's more sustainable, a completely cooled down shopping mall or investing in creating outdoor spaces in the city where you can walk around and feel safe?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that there are no spaces like that, because there are. It's just like probably way less, or like specific streets. They're a lot more pedestrian friendlier in a way, or like pedestrian only. But this still, like, it depends a lot of. Again, everything depends on the place that you're referring to. But there are a lot of streets that have a really strong like city center, like commercial areas. The most of the times they're actually mixed use, not only commercial. But back to your question, I think it's kind of like an obvious answer for us. I'm not going to say the shopping malls are necessarily bad. No, I think they can be really nice spaces at times. But if you really want to create a strong city experience and thinking of safety and infrastructure and everything, and just like really creating an experience that everyone can have independently of where they're coming from, who they are, their like economic status or anything. Really, you're going to be thinking of having a stronger city, like a presence in the city with a diversity of uses, with nice architecture, with nice public spaces. That's always going to be my choice.
How about you, Aishwarya?
Mumbai has plenty of third places. Like, there's no shortage of it. No one's gonna. Well, I've things have changed after COVID, obviously, but before that, and when I was growing up, you can play on the streets. One thing is that India or Mumbai has big like cricket is a big sport. So even in the city, we have, of course, we have stadiums, which we have here as well, but we have like big playgrounds, like just just grass. It's not like a designed garden. There are a couple of big playgrounds, and I see groups of men, not women as such. That's a different topic, but I see group of men just playing cricket, and you can just go and sit there. The kids playing, like no one's gonna come and ask you like why are you here, what are you doing. Um, the the coastal, like what we have, like obviously it's a coastal city, so we have really nice western coast. Unfortunately now, because of development, most of it is being built because of they're expanding it into like us into a highway or a big road that is encroaching into the sea. But before that, we had a nice coastal it's called Marine Drive, so you can just go and sit there and chill. No one's gonna tell you anything except at night. At 3 o'clock the cops come and they're like, oh, you need to go now. But that's it. But you can actually go there. Then you have people who are selling tea, then you are selling snacks. So it's like a really nice thing. No one's going to judge you based on, if you don't have money, just go and sit there. No one cares. Um, Also, shopping malls is a big thing in India. In Mumbai, I used to see like a lot of families, especially, moms and like a group of moms and their kids used to like just go and sit there, have ice cream. In fact, my first internship in India, when I worked in India, I worked on refurbishment of a shopping mall. It's the largest mall in India. And we were actually designing public spaces inside the mall, like sitting spaces and, green spaces. So that, I mean, I never thought about it until now, but that's what I think we were doing. We were not designing the shop facades or anything. We were actually designing the atriums and how people are going to sit and, all the canopies and everything. So that's really interesting. Because of the weather, it's so hot outside. So people want to go into the mall and, get the air conditioned air. So that is something interesting to observe, because how weather also plays an important role. How indoor outdoor spaces both are necessary, and all the climate, because it keeps on changing. So there's not, like we said, there's not one kind of a third place we can make. And like you asked, which one is more sustainable? Obviously, shopping, mall, it's all important for the economy. We need that, for the economy. But let's say if we come up with a prototype that involves, the best of both worlds, how it can be sustainable, how people can have the experience of indoor, outdoor, people can feel safe. We can think of such, and I'm sure someone somewhere is doing something like that. So we just have to think how we can make this possible.
Definitely. Now, I have one last question for you. What's one thing an everyday person can do to make their city a better place?
It's a very easy one, because for me, it would just be like, don't litter. Like, just be, just be, just be mindful of, it creates bad smell, bad aesthetics, and it's not good overall. It's gonna bring in rats and everything. You don't need to be a designer, planner to do that. I think everyone can be a little mindful of keeping their surroundings clean, and also keeping an eye out on their fellow people. Like, that's one thing. If you, I feel we need not be individualistic. We can all operate as a community. So being aware of your surrounding and just being out there for everyone.
I've been thinking of how to answer this, and I don't know if it would be like something you can do every day, because I kept thinking like, oh, you can advocate for public transportation, but that's not necessarily something that you can do every day. So maybe something that like every person could think of doing is really like try to make your neighborhood or your community stronger. If there are local businesses around you, like that's a great place. That's a great way to like make the economics of your neighborhood better. Like just support people that are around you, and also don't just deny every density or every different use that your neighborhood could have. Like if there's some kind of new development or zoning that like wants to bring something new to your community, like don't just say no. Sometimes you really have to analyze, like, is that gonna bring any sort of improvement to my community? Is it gonna allow more people to live here? Is it gonna allow me or other people that live in the community access to, for example, food or other kind of things that you might not have just because there's a very restrictive zoning? So yeah, trying to find ways to make your community stronger in a way.
I really like those. Thank you so much. Beautiful ending. Now, if our listeners want to follow your journey and find out more about your work, where can they find you?
We are on LinkedIn, and we are just starting a new Instagram page that we didn't have before. We're on LinkedIn. We're going to be Herb on the Go. We have a page for our podcast, and we also have our own personal pages. But anything related to podcasts, it's going to be posted on the Herb on the Go page, and on Instagram, it's going to be herbonthego.podcast. And you can listen to Herb on the Go on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
I will link everything in the description so people can check you out. Thank you so much. It was really cool talking to you, and I really gained a new perspective on the pedestrian point of view from a city, I think.
Thank you so much for having us. This was really fun.
A huge thank you for listening. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you listen to the podcast to support me and so you don't miss an episode. And while you're there, I'd also be so grateful if you could rate and review us. If you have any guest suggestions or any feedback, you can find me on the socials at LatinaShip. Thanks.